right. Liz, Jamie, hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey guys.
So just in case you didn't recognise those two, that is of course Jamie and Behan of Sailing Vessel Totem.
Thanks for asking us to do this. It was actually really fun to hear from you. We hope Millie's doing better. It's been fun seeing her.
We met the Totem family in PSS in 2014 when we were doing our total refit.
Well, Totem has circumnavigated once before, done another lap around the Pacific, and now we're doing our little tour.
Esper is astonishingly similar to our boat Totem.
Why did you choose all the funky colors? So Marin, what are some of your favorite things about the shipyard?
I'm here with Esper's engine.
Hard to say. I like the dogs. So Jamie, I hear you're having some problems?
End of the first week in the boatyard. How have you found it?
Oh, those were the days. They were indeed. So Behan is a writer and a blogger, and she's written a book called Voyaging with Kids. And Jamie, he's a sail designer, and he works with Phil Auger of Zoom Sails, who made our sails for Esper.
They've just completed a circumnavigation, but we'll let Behan explain where they are now and what this video is all about.
We're anchored here in Matachin Bay, Pacific side of Mexico, sort of roughly between Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan. Our plans just changed a lot, just like a lot of people's. And it's something that the coronavirus has changed for people on boats and people on land. But one of the things you noticed in stuff we've been sharing online is that we feel like the cruising life actually prepared us pretty well.
So as Behan explains, she's just written a piece on how being a liveaboard has potentially prepared us for lockdown. And it's a subject that we wanted to explore coincidentally at the same time. So who better to ask for their advice and opinions on the subject?
Yeah, now their situation is slightly different to ours in that we are here in a marina, as you all know. It wasn't somewhere we chose to be, but this is where we've ended up. And similarly, they didn't choose to be there, but Behan and Jamie are at anchor off the coast of Mexico.
Correct, although the similarities are that they are not allowed to exercise either, so no swimming, no paddle boarding around the boat, no going for walks on beaches either.
They're not allowed ashore at all?
They're allowed ashore to provision only.
Okay. So that's a slight difference between us, but ultimately we are prepared on our boats for long-term living, aren't we, aboard?
A decade of living in the margins, as Behan puts it, has prepared us for this shift towards uncertainty and upheaval.
We are always in changing situations. Every day is a change in a new scenario. There's no pattern, and so with the development of the COVID-19, as we were watching it and preparing to cross to the South Pacific, we had a real big agenda and plan to get a long way from where we are now, and to switch away from that seemed like it should have been a huge deal, but in reality, I think as French Polynesia started to get more and more restricted, it was very quickly obvious that no, it doesn't make sense. We'd be a burden on their society. We'd potentially be bringing in a liability.
And as soon as that switch flipped, it was like, well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course we're not going to go.
We're just not going.
And it was no big deal.
So I think Jamie and Behan hit the nail squarely on the head there. They were planning for a very big trip, similar in length to us, albeit in opposite directions. And of course, planning for a big trip involves a lot of things. There's route planning, weather systems, provisioning, getting the boat ready, not to mention, of course, the mental preparation for that as well.
Yeah, you've done a lot before you head off onto those very big crossings. You've got your boat ready. Hopefully you've got your head ready. But there are all kinds of things that can come along and scupper your plans. We had that problem a couple of years ago when Mum died, didn't we?
Yeah, we were planning to do our Sumatra trip, which of course we eventually did do last year, but we had planned to do that 2 years previously.
Yeah.
But because of situations outside of our own control, Liz was having to go back to the UK. I mean, we even got as far as inviting our friend Kev Berry over from Australia to join us for that trip.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he actually flew over and he did join us, but at the last minute we were unable to do that trip.
Yeah,
So-
I had to go back, didn't I? I had to go back to the UK, look after my poor old mum, and it left you in the lurch on your own.
And being comfortable with the uncertainty that we have. We deal with so much uncertainty on an everyday basis as cruisers because our lives depend on the weather to a great extent. And, you know, part of it is that adaptability, arriving in a new place and just not knowing, you know, what it's really going to be like until you experience it firsthand. But part of it is just that wild card of the number of dynamics that could change. And it's so much just part and parcel that I think we're able to accept it reasonably well.
As you all undoubtedly heard and read about before lockdown was imposed in all our countries, there was panic buying everywhere. Toilet rolls, which we never could get our heads around. And we even heard of someone who bought a second freezer, which they put in their garden and filled up with food.
It wasn't just one person. I think freezers were being sold on eBay at extortionate prices because everyone was buying a second freezer.
We made the decision weeks ago now. We'll stay here, and we were preparing already for a big passage and to be away from box stores for a long time, and so we were provisioning up, and that served us well.
Exactly. There's the next thing, that cruisers are so well prepared for the confinement that people have under coronavirus. It's so normal for us to do that deep provisioning. We didn't have to think about it that hard. When that switch flipped and we made the decision, instead of doing, you know, the detailed plan and mapping out the pantry and all this stuff, I literally made a list, went shopping, and that was it. We've got food for about 6 months on the boat.
So I guess in a way we can kind of understand this panic buying from people on land. I mean, you take, for example, my parents, they love a daily walk into town. It's part of their exercise routine. And they never hold any more food for just a few days worth.
Yeah, because part of the thing they do is just do that little shop.
Yeah, but conversely, us yachties are used to provisioning for long periods of time.
From gated mansions to one-bedroom apartments or boats, we're all having to come to terms with staying at home.
So how do we, living on a boat the entire length of just one room in a house, how do we cope with it?
Something that I think cruising has prepared us really well for, though, in terms of the pandemic, is staying at home. We were getting ready for this passage. It was going to be probably around 3 weeks, and we've been now self-isolated on our boat, and it's been about 3 weeks. And it's not a big deal. We're not phased. We're not stir crazy. We actually just sit down the other day. I had to look up a charge receipt, like the text from using a credit card, to figure out the last day that we'd been on shore. And it's over 3 weeks now. It just isn't something that we're that fixated on. We're pretty happy. We're pretty content on our little floating island. We're self-sufficient.
I think we would like a little bit more opportunity to go swimming and some exercise, but where we are right now specifically doesn't work very well for that. But otherwise, it's not a big deal to have adapted to that.
As cruisers making ocean passages, we get used to being in a very small space for a long period of time. I think the longest we've made a crossing is 3 weeks. The next one we're planning is going to be a lot longer than that. But yeah, so you're used to it. We've got used to that beforehand. We've also got used to being alone at anchor. We're often in remote anchorages for long periods of time. If you've watched our videos, you'll have seen those drone shots of us and nothing else around. And then the other thing we have to deal with is being in each other's pockets in this very small space.
Yeah, so this lifestyle does kind of prepare us in some ways for this lockdown. But the points that Liz raises, of course, there are some subtle differences. When you're doing an ocean passage, you do have focus. You have a beginning, middle, end of the journey, so you can see light at the end of the tunnel, as it were. And you're keeping yourself occupied, running the boat itself. So there's no time to get bored.
That's right, yeah. And when you're in an anchorage, it's fine. Yes, we are remote and we are confined to the boat, but we're not really. We can jump in the sea, we can go swimming, we can go ashore, we meet local people. If there happens to be a bar or a restaurant or something, we'll eat ashore. So it's not really the same, is it?
Another area in which cruisers are prepared is of course long distance communication. When you're on land and you're close by your family and friends, you perhaps tend not to communicate so much online using social media because you're seeing them face to face. But of course for us, we're away from our family and friends for 2 years at a time.
Yeah.
So we're quite used to communicating using things like Facebook and WhatsApp.
Yes, it's not a new thing for us, although having said that, it looks like landlubbers have really entered into the spirit of online communication, and we tried a Zoom conversation the other day, which we'd never done before. It lasted 5 hours.
Now, in Behan's blog post, she actually opens up her article on the idea of instant gratification and the fact that when you're on land, you can get quite used to being able to order things on services like Amazon and get next day delivery. And that's something that us yachties don't necessarily have the advantage of.
And in the same way, it's not a big deal to have to push out getting things. So for people at home, if they didn't have it, now they need to get it, and maybe it's not available. And okay, the toilet paper situation is both ridiculous and a little bit disturbing. But let's say, I don't know, let's say you wanted to get another, whatever, battery bank for your device. You order it on Amazon, it's on your, doorstep the next day. We're so used to not having instant gratification. We're so accustomed to stuff being pushed out that happening around coronavirus for us is, we don't even notice it.
One subtlety for us I think is interesting is that when we go on passage, we're even more conservative with water use, and we manage our waste better, our garbage, and our resources, our propane and things. And when we switch gears to being in isolation here, while being in the same places that we normally are when we're not in isolation because we're just hanging out near the coast of Mexico, I think it took a little bit to adapt to, okay, we can't just put normal waste in the garbage in the same way.
Right.
We need to
We're not on a
things.
passage, so we forgot some of the passage mode items. What do you do?
I'm getting a thing.
He's getting a thing. All right, he's getting a thing.
So after a few days and realizing that we don't
Right,
have a
the thing.
place to throw garbage until we're in a place where we can dispose of it properly,
Right.
all the soft plastic goes in here. This is 2 weeks worth of soft plastic, everything that's been food consumed and the waste from that.
And it looks full, but it's not full yet because it's just loose plastic, and we'll probably stuff another week or two's
There's
worth
another
in it.
week or two worth
Yeah.
of space of soft plastics in here, and that's really a big deal to managing space because
Yeah.
bags of garbage all over ends up in maggots and unpleasant situations.
Right, so there's our garbage.
And by the way, there is one area that I've noticed recently which is quite interesting to comment on. For the last 15 years, I've been cutting my own hair. So I have a pair of clippers on board. I do about 90% of it, loose finishes off the back. But I've noticed since lockdown, a number of my male friends have all gone out and bought clippers and are now cutting their own hair. Of course, there are disadvantages from being on a boat, especially away from civilization. All of us, whether on land or at sea, can be subject to misinformation. Now, conspiracy theories aside, we do know that a lot of people back home were a little bit confused by the government directive when the lockdown was first enforced in the UK, for example, and certainly we also suffer from similar problems.
People have good intentions on sharing information, but it's become a difficult situation because people's interpretation of information is changed. It's not great, and so rumors are spreading quickly, and really kind of a poor perception of this port's closed, but it's really not, or that port, or this thing is happening, that's happening, and so there's a lot of people struggling, I think, with the slow trickle of information.
We are fortunate here in Sutra Harbour Marina because we have a WhatsApp group that our friend Alvin is contributing to every day, and there are very clear channels of communication, so we don't tend to suffer from that.
I think perhaps one of the ways in which we are slightly better equipped to deal with the situation is that we've been living in each other's pockets for a long time now. We've learned to knock the corners off each other. We've learned to shout and swear at each other and to let it go. But that did take a long time, and I can understand when I read some of the things in the paper and see friends' posts online that it's proving to be a little bit of a problem for people.
Not something maybe cruising is necessarily prepared as well for, because at least we certainly see people not reacting really well on an individual basis, and that's just human responses to stress, I think, as much as anything.
Now, one example of people not coping particularly well, I can think of a friend we spoke to recently. I won't mention the names or where they are, but they're actually with a group of boats, and they're in among lots of lovely islands. And they've been given permission by the local authorities to actually sail between the islands, and they're even allowed to walk on shore on the islands which are uninhabited.
Lovely.
The problem that my friend was having was that one of the boats felt like they weren't being treated fairly by the authorities. Whereas my friend was saying, well, look, come on, we've got it good here. You know, we are allowed to exercise. Look at people like us that aren't even allowed to exercise around the marina anymore. And so we both agreed that really it was probably this guy that had the problems, is just really not coping with the situation very well, or even able to put it in perspective.
Yeah, so it just shows you, even with all that experience as a cruiser, this situation is unexpected and he's anxious and stressing out about it.
There's definitely been some challenges in accepting the new reality and the really yawning void of uncertainty that coronavirus brings. We think it's going to be a while. I mean, we'd love to think that our plans are only pushed out by a year, and that this time next year, like literally right now, we should be having our equator party on our way to the Marquesas. And I hope that this month next year we'll be able to do that. But maybe not. Maybe it's really going to be devastating. Maybe the way that it plays out in vulnerable islands makes that impossible. We just don't know.
I think one of the biggest issues for us yachties is that, bureaucracy aside, we are used to living a free life. We choose where we go, when we go, how long we stay there, and when we move on.
Yes, it's the curtailment of that wanderlust that we all have, which is probably what we're finding most difficult to deal with. We have to be thankful for what we have learned as cruisers, because all that knowledge has really helped us in this situation. And of course, being right here isn't too bad, is it?
It's not too bad at all. Of course, we wouldn't choose to be stuck in a marina when there's all that beautiful coastline just up the coast. And in the same way, you wouldn't choose to be stuck at home either. We certainly live in interesting times.
Yes, and remember, this too shall pass. Peace and fair winds.
We miss you guys. It'd be great to catch up sometime. Bye.
Hi, guys.